Hey guys, in today's move lesson we're going to talk about strength training. So strength training is extremely important for building muscle, strength, metabolism and improving your health markers like your bone density and your blood pressure. But it's also really important for resilience to stress, for building up your confidence in yourself and improving your ability to overcome things. I find strength training is the basis of our program, and in our program we call them build sessions. So a strength session involves exercises that are done for certain or pre-allocated sets and reps. So you'll notice this next to your build exercises. They'll have a number of sets that we need to do and a number of reps. Now a repetition is a lower and a raise of an exercise, like a bicep curl. That is one repetition. So for most of your strength exercises, they will involve a repetition. Certain things that are like an isometric hold, like a plank, will be for time, but still a similar deal. It's for an allocated rep or set. A set is a full completion of the amount of repetitions that you are allocated to do. So example, 10 repetitions of bicep curl would equal a set. Cool. So the difference between that and cardio is cardio tends to just be done for time and you do quite a lot of repetitions for it, so it's a bit different. Cool. So what I'd like to talk about today is the basic movement patterns, the basic things you need to know about your strength training before we hop out onto the floor and go through them. So I will be helping you out in the small group sessions to actually go through the movement patterns. I'll give you little tweaks here and there, but if you understand these basics and learn them, then they're going to hold you in good stead for the whole length of your strength training life. So first up, before we begin actual movement patterns, we need to understand quite a bit about our core. So our core is the basis of our balance and our center of gravity, obviously between here and here. If you do not have good core strength, then you're going to have a lot of issues with your movement patterns. So to begin with, my first concept I always explain to people is neutral spine. So neutral spine is when your spine is in its natural S shape. It's its best position for absorbing shock in most movements that are loaded against gravity. Now this comes into play with most exercises that you come across. There are a few different ones that do not require it, but as a general rule, neutral spine is extremely important. So to attain neutral spine, you need to stand with your hips tucked, your belly drawn in and your core on about 20%. So this means your rib cage is down, not flared, and then your shoulders back and down. Attaining neutral spine is a great habit to practice, not just in the gym, but also when you're at the shops or at home or doing anything. So number one is neutral spine. Moving on from that, the cylinder of our core is a really great way to make sure we're bracing correctly through our core and making sure that we've got good even intra-abdominal pressure when we do our exercises. So if you've got neutral spine, then you will also have what's called the cylinder. So that involves your diaphragm muscle at the top, which is your breathing muscle, your pelvic floor muscle down the bottom, which you can tuck up against gravity, and then your transverse abdominis muscle that wraps all the way around your belly. So when they're all together, they create a cylinder that when they're all evenly stacked has nice even pressure, which is great, especially for your big compound movements like deadlifts and squats. So try and imagine that either when you're doing core exercises or those big compounds, is neutral spine first, then find the cylinder of your core. Breathe into that space and you should feel that you're able to engage your core throughout the movements. And the last thing is breathing. Try and breathe down into your diaphragm and out into that space all the time. Because if you're breathing up into your chest, then A, it's not going to create that intra-abdominal pressure, and B, it increases your stress response to everything. If you're relaxed, you'll tend to breathe down low. If you're stressed, you'll tend to breathe up high. So focus on breathing down into your diaphragm. Now, once you've understood those concepts of your core, they're going to be quite a similar pattern before you begin any of your exercises. Attain neutral spine. Now we'll move on to some of the basic movement patterns. So for your first 4 weeks of training, we're doing full body workouts, which involve going through all of these movements in one single workout. But once you learn them, they are the basic movement patterns we use that you'll become familiar with. They're found in most movements. And the first thing we want to discuss is that we always do compound movements before isolated. So a compound movement is a movement that uses more than one joint. So for example, a squat is a compound movement pattern because you use your knee and your hip to do the movement. A bicep curl, like we did before, is an isolated movement because it only uses one joint. So your first little while, we're mainly focusing on compound movement patterns. As we go down towards upper lower splits, we'll involve a little bit more isolated exercises. So Remember that to start with. These are all compound movement patterns. So for the lower body, you can read a little bit more detail about them in your exercise encyclopedia for an exact exercise, but I just want to go through them briefly so you understand the difference. We've got two major flexion movements, so that means flexing of the knee and the hip, and two major hinging movements, which are hinging at the hips. So the first one's a squat, is a flexion movement pattern because it bends both the knee and the hip. So squats will come into play with goblet squats, barbell squats, wall sits, sit-to stands, all those sort of movements. The other one is a lunge movement. It's a split squat movement. So you'll have 1 foot forward, 1 foot back, still a flexion movement, so lowering and raising. This comes into play with things like step ups, lunges, walking lunges, anything like that. So those two are flexion movements, knee and hip. They use mainly the quad and the glute and the hamstring to engage. Now hip hinging movements are things like deadlifts. You will need to hinge at the hips, I should go this way. You hinge at the hips like this. That means you use your glutes and your hamstrings, and then I'm just going to get on the floor for a bit. And then a glute bridge or a hip thrust is one of those hip thrusting movements. So you're mainly using the glutes for that one. But those are the 4 major movement patterns that I use in our workouts, and they hit most areas, all areas of your lower body. Now for upper body, we've got horizontal push and pull and vertical push and pull. So for horizontal press, these are things like chest press, push-ups. We push in a horizontal plane. So this uses your chest. For horizontal pull, this is anything that is a row. We use our back muscle, so mid-back. This is pulling movements. And then vertical press overhead are things like shoulder press, and then vertical pull coming down is anything like a lat pull down or a pull-up. So if you have a little look at that, that is a nice balanced overview of the compound movement patterns that we go through in a workout. Oh, and of course, core exercises. So we're going to go through those week by week. More description of each exercise, as I stated before, is in the exercise encyclopedia, and of course what I will take you through. But hopefully you got a little bit more understanding about why we do strength training and how it's all split up so that it makes more sense.